Live streaming is on.
Okay, so we are back after some technical problems with the backup system. Sandro, Ole, sorry for the interruption. Sandro is
No worries.
presenting about himself a little bit. We can prolong it 5-10 minutes, no worries. We have plenty of time. So, Sandro, please.
All right. I think it stopped where I said I developed the original Subficious, the open source version,
And we all hate you for that, Sandro.
and everyone hates me personally for that. I had some abuse thrown at me in the past, but yeah, tried to make the world a bit better through that. I'm not sure how well I succeeded, but we now develop the Subficious Pro, which is total rewrite, complete rewrite, and many new modules and so on, which we use for our work when we're testing VoIP and WebRTC solutions for when we're testing for security problems. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that what we've been working on lately is it's been a mixture of denial of service simulation on SIP, and it never ceases to amuse the sort of findings that we get during our work. And we started looking at WebRTC as well quite a few years ago, really. But lately we pushed a bit more on WebRTC security and had one major finding, I would say, that we could replicate across different providers, service providers for WebRTC, and we've been submitting to bug bounties. This is the turn server abuse that we found, where one could make use of a turn server and connect to local services inside behind the firewall and so on and so forth. So that's been quite a big thing for certain providers. And yeah, we've been looking at Kamailio configuration and vulnerabilities that might affect specific configurations in Kamailio. So yeah, we've been doing stuff.
You've been doing great stuff, and I really want to thank you for, not for SIP issues, but for all the rest of the work you're doing, and the way you're handling it by reporting it in a very sensitive way. As a developer, we're always grateful and happy when people like you look into our code, our configurations, because we make mistakes. We make new mistakes every day, and we need help to find them and learn from them. So it's critical for everyone in the Kamailio team that you look at our product and you find these kind of issues. And I'm hoping for more. Yeah. Not serious though. But there are probably configurations that can be really bad. There are probably holes in the code somewhere, probably in my module. I don't know.
Well, for sure, there are a lot of modules in Kamailio that are, perhaps not part of the core, and they are less explored, but they're being used. So that is one area. Another area is specific configurations where things behave in certain ways that might be abused, where you're concatenating strings, for example, inside the Kamailio configuration, and so on and so forth. This can be very interesting, and
we have a lot. Yeah, and we have a lot of database connectivity, so SQL injection is probably one risk as well.
Honestly, I have never seen SQL injection in Kamailio. I think there is use of prepared statements. It's been a while since I know. Well, then,
Not everywhere.
not everywhere. So there might be places.
Not everywhere, but we are doing escaping from the C code where this is a potential. It's for specific configuration file that use SQL ops module, because you can do any query from the config file, and then it's the job not of the developer but the job of the admin of that system to create a safe SQL query. It's why we have this transformation for SQL escape in the Kamailio interpreter. But again, this is practically specific to the config file. In the C code, at least the main module that I'm working with, they use the API for escaping, because it's a common API. And I don't recall anyone using direct queries, like just passing full query in the C code. They should use our intermediate layer with an array of values that we escape. Just to clarify.
As Sandra said, we have many modules that are old and not many people are maintaining it. But we'll see where we go. Should I confuse everyone with a short presentation, and then we'll see where we go?
Please.
I think Daniel said most things. I spend a lot of time trying to build SIP platforms and praying to higher powers that I get a customer who really wants a secure SIP platform. But during almost 20 years in the SIP world, I haven't seen one. I had a customer earlier that purchased a secure SIP gateway and secure SIP phones for remote workers. When I audited it, they had self-signed certs in the server, so the client couldn't validate the server to make sure they connect to the right server. But they also had the same certificate and the same private key and public key in each phone. So this is the level, and they paid quite a lot of money for that. That's the level of security we have today. Looking at the standards, I spent a lot of time on that. We haven't really got any, I would say, good documents that describe for developers like us in the Kamailio team how to make SIP more secure. Now, in the last years, most of the focus, like Sandra mentioned, have been on WebRTC, and people believed, oh, it's secure because we mandated encryption of the audio streams and we mandated TLS in the web server. But that doesn't mean that everything everyone writes in WebRTC is secure. We have systems, WebRTC gateways, that use the same DTLS certificate and key pair for years in and out without exchanging it, without modifying it, right?
Well, we found something like that. Let me interrupt you a bit.
Absolutely.
In the case of Slack, right? So Slack had this the TLS certificate, and I can't talk about it because it's public now. Which Janos had were distributing since the very first commits. It was so they were distributing a private key, a private key, and the corresponding certificate. And Slack, since they use Janos, they still had that, and it was publicly available stuff, you know. So this is really bad, yeah.
So this all means that we still need to contract people like Sandro for our WebRTC systems or solutions, because even though we have security in the browser, we have the potential for security in the media layer, people write their own implementation, and there are many, many more developers than we have in the Kamailio team, and we are quite a lot of developers. But many more developers are around the world that are hacking with WebRTC. So I wouldn't be too sure that all WebRTC applications are secure. They have, I would say, opportunistic privacy. I mean, you get some sort of encryption, but you don't verify with whom. You get some sort of confidentiality over the coffee shop network, but you can't trust who you're speaking with. It depends on your computer. There are some documents in the huge pile of WebRTC RFCs. People complain a lot over the SIP stack of RFCs. WebRTC is catching up. But there are a few documents that talk about WebRTC identity systems. And those are very interesting because some of these systems from the web are now sneaking into SIP, the good old SIP. In the IETF, we have updated SIP in 2 steps lately. We've been struggling hard for a long time to get rid of MD5 as the bearing hash algorithm for authentication. We don't see that we'll get rid of it because desktop phones will be living on without any firmware updates. But at least in the standards, we now have stronger authentication algorithms. What we haven't solved is how to stop Sandro from playing a downgrade attack. If we have a Kamailio server that accepts both MD5 and something stronger, how can we deny downgrade to MD5 if we really want the strong authentication? But the consensus in the SIP group was that, well, this is just a small step that should have been done many years ago. MD5 have been vulnerable for a long time. So a couple of guys started working on an experiment to see if we could take the web authentication called OAuth or OpenID Connect and bring that to SIP. And that's a very interesting experiment. I'm not sure that we're done yet. We have an RFC. I don't know if it's published, but it's certainly going to be published any day if it's not already out. I'm not happy with all of it, but I injected some things. In the web, you authenticate with some sort of authentication server and identification provider. And after you prove that you are who you claim to be, you get a token, and you take that token, a ticket to ride, with you to the SIP server. And anyone who gets their hands on that token can actually use the SIP server for a limited amount of time on your behalf. So it's quite important that we have protection of that small token. In the web world, we normally communicate more or less directly with the web service, but in the SIP world, we quite often have ingress proxies or outbound proxies or something else in between. And if we transport the tokens in clear text, it's not going to be a good solution. So that's an interesting standard. We need to take a look at that, and we need to start coding in Kamailio to see what we can do. But we need both the Kamailio server and we need a team that works on some clients that we can play with for this.
That's pretty interesting. We have tested, of course, OAuth systems on the web, and usually the problem with such authentication solutions is the part where you get to redirect to where you want to authenticate.
In clear text, yes.
Not necessarily in clear text. It's less about clear text and more about being able to have the attacker sometimes redirect the victim to the attacker's website, which gets the code, and the code can
Gets
then
the
be
token.
reused, the token, the temporary token, and then the attacker can use that to authenticate on behalf of
Yeah,
the
but
victim.
what I meant, even if we have TLS protection, the redirection will show up in web logs in many different systems.
It
So
tends to be temporary, right? So that's kind
yeah.
of what makes it not too bad in some cases, unless the logs are, of course, available to anyone in real time, which does happen. We've seen this.
Yeah. So I think this standard will need some work until we're done. One part of it that I think I caused is that the tokens from the IDP has to be encrypted with a public key belonging to the SIP server, the registrar, so that only the registrar can access the keys, the session keys. And that's part of the OAuth standard, but not implemented in many systems today.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we were to step back a bit, from my point of view, I see a lot of these things being developed. I don't really track them too well until we get to test them. And then you start finding these, particular scenarios where you get a security hole that maybe were not somehow thought about during the design of such
And
systems.
I'm on the other side. I'm trying to contribute to the standards before we code or during coding.
Yeah.
Try to sort out some problems. But it's really hard because a lot of the energy has gone out of the SIP standards project. There are very few people in there, and they have certain implementations in mind, really. But if we jump back to TLS, I've seen on the mailing list that there has been a lot of work on TLS. People are starting to use it. How much TLS have you tested and seen in real life?
Lately,
For SIP,
we've been seeing more and more TLS actually in the past 2 or so years. SIP TLS has definitely been implemented. With our clients, we've seen SIP TLS quite a bit.
Okay.
Up to
And
2 years
have you
ago,
tested verification of server search and client search and all that?
Yeah. So this is the problem, right? One of the main problems is, okay, you have SIP TLS, but you cannot really enforce and know in some cases if the SIP clients are actually verifying the certificates, especially with hardware phones. It's so often that they have certificate checking off.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make it totally useless, depending on the protocols being used for TLS especially. But
as I said, you get some sort of opportunistic encryption. You get some confidentiality, but you have no way of knowing who you're talking with.
Yeah. So that's
or who's
definitely
listening
one
in.
problem. Another problem is, even if you have SIP TLS enabled, and we've had for example, one client comes to mind, they had SIP TLS enabled, but then RTP was still plain text. And that's another venue, right? And there's no way that you can tell if RTP is gonna be plain text or encrypted using SRTP, using SDS somehow, or and so on. So that's another problem with this. I think in the VoIP world, as in SIP VoIP world, especially many of the legacy systems, out there, security has been mostly patchwork, and that's why I kind of quite like WebRTC, because yes, you do need offensive security to find security problems there as well, but at least there is some some good standards. The basic things have been,
Yeah,
they tried to address them, right, with encryption.
we raised all the basic stuff.
Yeah.
We prohibited STS, keys in clear text.
Yeah.
We prohibited non-TLS web sessions. So the base level is much higher than for SIP.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we can
I just have
discuss.
to say before Daniel interrupts that I'm really happy to see all the changes that has been done in Kamailio. We're keeping up with a lot of the TLS standards. We have added TLS 1.3. We have really worked hard to keep up with TLS, and we have a good but a bit complex but good TLS support in Kamailio, so we can do a lot of different things, especially with event routes.
Yeah.
So Kamailio is doing fine, but I'm having a hard time finding hard phones and soft phones to test Kamailio with. So I'm testing Kamailio TLS with Kamailio.
Not
Thanks,
ideal.
Ole. I just wanted to divert a little bit the discussion, because I'm sure we can discuss for the entire day about SIP security, a little bit on the current worldwide situation, and if you found some tricks, or you can share some tricks, tips for people working from home, any suggestions, what's good to use, what's not good to use, where to look for keeping as much as possible high security and privacy. Have you?
I would continue this path and say that if you're working from home, for me, relying on the traditional hard phones would be hard. It would be much better to have a SIP phone in WebRTC connecting to your SIP server in the back end, where you can control the privacy and everything. WebRTC gives you confidentiality between the backend WebRTC server and your browser, and the rest you can take care of in the data center.
Okay, so providers should look at deploying a way to connect via WebRTC. That's a good point. Sandro, for you, what practically, I guess you are working from home like many before in real-time communication, but if you have some hints to share.
Well, I would second Oli, and I would say essentially, I mean, most of the web world has moved towards things like zero trust security model, where you don't use VPN, where you don't try to, authenticate specific protocols, but Google's Beyond Corp and so on. And WebRTC is the natural progression for that in the real-time communications world. So, yeah, I would second Oli and say, yeah, we need to, if you want to work from home securely, it's very difficult to do it with traditional VoIP solutions. There's so many ways that security has been only patched in and can be somewhat bypassed.
I'm also impressed by this video conferencing tools, including Jitsi video conference bridge, because as well as demo a little bit during the break, you can add video filters, bubbles, or you can blur your background as everyone has maybe little kids or other companion animals that could disrupt or make it a little bit funny. Those help, which you indeed cannot find on hard phone or old systems, like all the video conferencing systems.
Yeah. No, I'm very happy. I've talked about video for many, many years as a communication medium, even ever since I worked with video communication for deaf and hearing impaired. And during most of the years, people have said, why use video? But during the last 6 months, a lot of those friends have come to show me how to use video and how it works. So finally, video is getting there.
Okay, so let's prepare for ending. Any final statement, as we are a bit late, and to move to the next session. Any recommendation for the future? What to do, where to focus on, and
Shall I go?
yeah.
So of course, it's what we do, but I think it's a good thing to do anyway. My focus would be to have offensive security become more part of the real-time communications world, as in take a more offensive security approach, attack, simulate real hacker attacks more, rather than just going ahead and implementing security solutions without having previously tested them. Take a more scientific approach where you can prove that there is a security problem, and then you can actually solve that security problem, instead of creating all sorts of solutions that might not work as intended.
Okay. So a good approach is just put your SIP server out there without the firewall and let Sandro play with it.
That's not exactly what I'm saying, but yeah, okay,
Okay.
that could be funny.
Okay. Ole?
I don't know. I think in many enterprises, the SIP platform is managed by telephony people that don't understand networking and network security. I think we need to really tie these teams together, put them in the same room, and don't assume that SIP is secure because you're running on a separate VLAN. You need to really focus on this and build a much better platform, and contract people like Sandro for testing it after contracting people like me for building it.
Okay, thank you so much for being part of the event here, and thank you again for being part of the ecosystem and helping with coding, reporting issues, finding issues, and looking forward for another decade of collaboration with you too.
Looking forward to it. And coding OAuth into Kamailio will be fun.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Ole. I'm now inviting Alex, which already joined. Alex, if you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks for joining us. I was looking to see what was new in Kamailio in the past year, and I saw you did a lot of contribution. It was the reason I contacted you to give us an update. Many thanks for working in what's one of the most complex components of the real-time communication out there, the IMS, voice over LTE specs.
Thank you very much.
So I'm looking forward to your presentation now.
Do you see my presentation?
Yes, everything is fine. If you want to see yourself as well during the presentation, you have to click on the video so you appear in parallel. But if you want only the slides, then it's fine to have only the slides. It's up to you how you prefer to do it. Your floor now.
Thank you.
I think you are muted now. Can you? I don't hear you. Now it's better.
Sorry, yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Alexander Yosifov. I'm working for for a small company. I have previous experience in parking and access control system and in gambling industry. Since 2013, I'm working in telecom industry. And for the past 1 year and a half, I'm leading a core network team in our company. And we are using Kamailio SIP server to integrate VoIP in our products. I am working together with an VoIP engineer and a QA and telecom engineer.
You are again muted.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
There's a few significant changes in the IP security model in the PCSF. Now the model supports SHA-1 and MD5 security algorithms that they are parsed from a register message. We are using ESP for security, ESP mod for IPsec. Now we are supporting IPv6 for IPsec. I did a lot of improvements in IMS register and PCSF models. This IPv6 version is supporting for TCP and UDP protocols. And for the last year, we contributed support of TCP protocol. As you see from the presentations, for IPv4 and v6 protocol, we put listen interfaces when we want to use TCP. For IP security, we need 4 security associations and 4 policies. There is a little graphic that presents the created policies and security associations for every new registration. We have 2 in policies and 2 outgoing policies, and we get the user equipment ports from the register message, and we have configured in the configuration file the ports, the server and the client ports for the proxy. We need the associations, security associations 3 and 4 for TCP replies when we want to use TCP protocol. For the last year, we extended the location table in PCSF. We put a new one more match key that is received port column, because during the re-registration of the user equipment, he used the same IP and the same server port, the same client port. Sorry, and sorry, the user equipment is using the same server port and the new client port, and for that reason we need to put a new match key in the table. And for the re-registration, we put 4 new columns. That is proxy client and server port, and proxy temporary and client server and client port. We did a lot improvements in serving model SCSF. Right now, the single notify is sent to the subscriber after registration. Before that, when we have a new re-registration from the same user equipment, the SCSF sends for each connection, for each registration, one notify. That's it's not good. Right now we have during the re-registration we sent to the user agent single contact in 200 reply. We sent exactly the contact that we need to send to the UA, because for new registration, before that in the registration reply was sent all of the contacts. Right now, when we have expired contact in SCSF, we send all contacts listed in notify message body to all subscribers. And the last significant improvements is that we delete all expired contacts from the database. That was a little bug fix. In some situations, some contacts stays in the database after expiration. Here I can show a body of a notify message. When we have expired contacts, we put this contact in the body and with state terminated and event expired, and we put the active contact with registered state and state event and state active. Before that fix, the first contact from the example with state terminated never sends to the subscribers. Right now I will explain with little examples, what you need to configure in the Kamailio configuration file for the proxy to enable IP security, and if you want to use TCP connections. First of all, in the red, you can see the parameters that are that are required to be configured in the configuration file. The first one is reuse port for the TCP, and especially for the IP security PCSF module, you need to add, if you use IPv6 address and 4, you need to describe the license address of the proxy server. You need to put the start address, start number for the client ports, and start number for the server ports. This parameter reuse server port by default is 1. It can be skipped here in configuration. In this example, we configure only 2 parallel connections. That's mean we can have only two registered user equipment at the same time. The next two parameters are not necessarily configurable. They are by default there for the IP security and SPI start address, SPI ID range. By default, they have these values. 100 is the start value, and IP and SPI ID range by default is 1000. They can be skipped here. Oh, sorry, I need to re-authenticate for 1 second. Sorry for that. I get from, if you want to use TCP connections, this parameter should be configured with yes value. I extract from a cookbook the explanation of this parameter. It's required and should be configured with yes, because for TCP connections, for replies, we need to use the same source port on which Kamailio is listening. As you see, you need to have operating system with reuse port compiled. The second parameter explained here is IPsec reuse server port. If it is set to 1, for every registration we use the same server port from the proxy site. If you want to use the new server port for every new registration for the same UE, just put this parameter to 1. I will explain here a little bit for the functions that are used for IP security. The first one is IPsec forward. We extended this function with one bitwise parameter FAQ with two values. The first is if it's set to 1, IPsec send for socket is named in the code. It's useful. It's useful for IPsec and TCP. You can, if it's set to 1, the message is sent. The requests are sent through the existing IPsec tunnel. It should be used in combination with TCP reuse port value yes. The second value for the IPsec forward flags is with value 2. It helps to use the newest security associations for requests when we have multiple re-registrations for the same UE, and this is must to be set to this flag to be set when we disabled contact aliases. I will explain a little bit in the next slides for the contact aliases how to be disabled. Here you can see the examples in register reply and on reply route. For MO reply, we can use IPsec IPsec forward with location domain and parameter 1. In the main request init route, we can use IPsec forward method with flag 3 because we want to force send for socket for TCP and to reverse search if we disable contact aliases. If we are using contact aliases, we can skip this value, this flag with value 2. The second important function is IPsec create. We put it again single flag parameter for this method, and with value 1. This flag adds functionality to delete all unused tunnels before each registration, because sometimes when we have some errors during re-registration or during new registration, the tunnels, the associations, and the security associations and the policies can be stay undeleted. And with this parameter, this flag, we guarantee that all unused tunnels will be deleted during new registration or re-registration. This is, I put here a simple code. When we invoke IPsec create method with location table and flag 1, we can invoke this method in register apply, and in register apply, the associations and the policies will be created for the new registration. Here you can see example how to disable contact aliases if you if you don't want to add it to the contact. Just create a simple define in your configuration. Here you can use in red color this define. When it's defined this with contact alias, we just put it. We just invoke add contact alias method for invite, subscribe, update, and register method for the received request from the EU to the proxy server. And within dialog root, we just put handle Rudy alias invocation to extract the alias from the request URI. In RTP configuration file, we need to put the same define if we have defined with contact alias, depends on request or reply, we put the alias for the message, for the contact, for the current request or a reply. Here you can see the listening ports for the TCP v6 and v4 when we have max two connections for TCP. In the blue color are the server ports. The red one are the default Kamailio ports on which Kamailio is listening, and in the green colors you can see the client ports. As I mentioned in the beginning, we need to listen on the client ports, because when we send requests over the TCP protocol, we expect the replies from the user equipment on the same ports. That was my shortly presentation for the last year and a half changes and contributions for the IPsec module in Kamailio. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Alex. Again, I really appreciate your contribution. The IMS extension are complicated by the specs anyhow, and any help in this area, it's very valuable. More than that, we know that this extension are typically used by large operators or maybe manufacturers for mobile devices, but is not the usual VoIP deployment, so it's not easy to find developers that want to work in this area, as well as testing in this area. A question from my point of view, what you have your own like lab, do you have access to like hard phones for testing, like mobile phones for testing, or you use some software application like IMS Droid in most of the cases for this testing? Because this is sometimes my problem when I want to test this one, what I can use as a client side for testing.
Right now we have a small WAP in our company that we are using real phones for tests, and yes, we are using real phones for tests. We are not using some software providers.
But you have sort of developer version for these mobile phones, or someone can enable and choose the mobile operator with the usual mobile phones?
We are using some kind of dev mods for the phones. We are not using real operators for the tests.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that it's not easy to get these developer mode phones, at least from the major vendors, like the big names in mobile devices. Maybe now it's easier to get from the smaller devices and try to test with. As I was working behind in the past with some company helping them with Kamailio and IMS, I knew about this and I wanted to share with everyone watching, as well as getting some updates if anyone else knows client-side tools for using in IMS deployment, especially for this development process, where one doesn't want to spend, significant budget. Okay, thank you. There is any question on the channel? I couldn't spot any so far. Thanks again for your contribution also to this event and being able to accommodate your schedule for the event in rather short notice. And looking forward to work together on the project with IMS extension or other modules. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much too.
Okay, now it's time for Igor to switch on its video and unmute. Hey Igor, long time no see from the last Kamailio Award, or?
Yeah, hello.
Doing fine?
Yeah, everything is fine. So thank you for having me. And
you've been around the project for a long time. You've been a couple of Kamailio Awards in Berlin. So it's time to return to the community also what you like to do with Kamailio, with the local development. I have to be like saying the truth here. I was really interested on this one because generating like a more complex development environment, it's useful, and never took the time to spend enough with Docker and all these tools around it or capabilities for building such environment.
Okay,
So for sorry, just to present, that's going to be more like a live demo. Maybe you have also some slides, but
yes, the question about slides. So it was originally yesterday. I was thinking that it's going to be fully live, but my friend said to me that he's tired to look just on the console and asked me to make some slides. So
that's perfect. Okay. Then your time now. Thanks for joining. I see your video. It's a little bit framed, maybe because of the connection. If you don't need to show your stream, you can turn it off the video, and we can see only the slides.
Okay, so I'll then turn off my video. But so anyway, first let me introduce myself. My name is Igor, and for the last 5 years, I'm working as a freelancer with different VoIP related project. So a small forward about what freelancing and what it's about and what kind of things it's around. So freelance life is a variety of usually small tasks with quite different technology stacks used. So why small tasks? Because there is no one will give a real big project to a single person. So it's not like a build a provider, I don't know, MVNO infrastructure from scratch or something like this. So usually it takes tasks to integrate all together already existing things, to add some small extra functionality to services that are already running, and so on. So that means that I have to work with a really big scope of existing technologies and programming languages as well. So on some project it could be Python, on some project it could be Lua, on some other project it could be JavaScript, whatsoever. So by the way, about the picture, if you think this is a picture of freelancer life, no, it's not, but it's just the picture to you to see, so not that boring. Anyway, that way of work and variety of tasks leads to a problem that I need to have for every project. I need to have a sort of development environment, so I can run a few and yeah, for sure, I can run a few projects at the same time. So sometimes clients give some existing environments, dev environments, sometimes they're not. So it depends, actually. So for example, one project could be Kamailio integrating with some HTTP API and routing based on this API. Second could be also Kamailio with some tricky dispatcher algorithm. Other, I don't know, it could be some custom development for the Fusion PBX, the project to mention, actually. So for each of these tasks, best to have development environments to test, but not only for this, but it's actually the main. One of the possible solutions, it's actually virtual machines. So great answer, but sometimes, you know, you need to have some kind of 3-4 different services that is running around. For example, database, web server, Kamailio, FreeSwitch, Asterisk, Node.js API, and all of this in one project. And at the end, with all of these virtual machines, it could actually be a mess. So yes, you can run it all the things on the single machine, means your host machine, but you have to deal with ports, interfaces, not to interfere, and actually sometimes you need to test SIP routing in more complex scenarios, and only routing through localhost cannot show you all some small details. So my answer to this problem, actually, the development environment based on Docker. Okay, So, okay, I know Docker again in 2020. I'm not about to introduce this thing to you. So it's, I think the most of the audience, okay, I can't see the audience, but I'm pretty believe that most of them are using, tried it at least, and some of them actually using it in production. So I am more to speak again of technology that we all know and maybe find some more of this. So like learning something through repeating existing things. And a small remark on Docker on production, I can be very, very long here because I made a study about this. So long story short, Docker and real time is not a good combination because of the how CFS is working. Means it's a kernel-based scheduler. So because by default it slices the kernel time to the 100 milliseconds, and let's say this: if you want to use the Docker in production, you have to fine-tune your kernel. I have some links later in presentation that the only actually the reason to have my presentation downloaded is those links. So if you want to use Docker in production, is actually to fine-tune again your kernel. And if you have some kind of best practices, I'm speaking to the audience, if you can share some information about this, I'm really glad to hear about this. So but it's for production. For testing, it's full okay, because okay, jitter on local machine, okay, I can live with it, and something like this. Next thing is about actually what I'm using for Docker to combine all of these things together. It's Docker Compose. Docker Compose is an orchestration system that allows you to describe a way of starting Docker containers, volumes, networks. So it's all in YAML format that actually can save your psychic from long Docker CLI with a myriad of parameters. So I can say the YAML is good for mental health as well, but better than this endless Docker command lines. So that's actually all of the slides, and we're gonna switch to the demo and actually the example of Docker Compose file that I'm actually using as how it's to say core when I'm starting some kind of new Docker Kamailio project. So here I'm actually having the described its Kamailio and asterisk. So Kamailio is listening on the port 5060, TCP and UDP, and the thing about database. I was thinking about, actually I was experimenting with the various types of the databases, and the database, for example, for testing, I found the more convenient is actually dbtext. Why dbtext? Because it's based on the plain files. So you can have a configuration stored in database and pushed into the Git. So in this way, you can have store your configuration in the same Git repository, just in different branches. So you don't have to put the binary MySQL data there or something like this, because okay, sometimes it's not the best idea. So, and actually with this thing with exploring dbtext, I think the Daniel noticed my today's complaining and bugging into the GitHub. So that's actually the base image that I'm using. It's just building Docker. And I'm actually, what I'm doing, I'm exporting the ATC Kamailios, so to have it here on my local file system, and database, so it's actually just a database with usual the dbtext. So and actually how to start it? It's quite simple. I'm using one alias just to simplify. It's docc, which is actually equal to the Docker Compose. So I will use the docc command. So to start the containers, it's simple as this. So it will start the container, and I can see all the containers, okay, are started, because the config file here is actually the basic config file that is actually just added the DB, and DB is repointed from the default MySQL to DB text. So, okay, we started it, and okay, what we have to use about the local development. So the idea, my idea is to quickly check the configuration that I'm writing and the Kamailio. So I'm connecting to the Kamailio container that is running, and here I have the Kamailio process that I can check the config file that is running here. So for example, if I'll make some, I don't know, errors or for example, just work or not, I'm not sure. So yes, I'm immediately can see some kind of errors here. So that's the idea of to start some initial development work on the local machine. And then, okay, I'm pretty aware that there is a different network environments, different real life situation, but at least you can fine tune your config. Having its advantage of having a Kamailio process is running on your local machine. So you don't need to debug and develop on some remote server. And let me actually show you some more advanced stuff, because, for example, here it's quite simple. It's just Kamailios and asterisk is running, and they are actually even not connected between each other. Here means Kamailio is don't know about asterisk, asterisk don't know about Kamailio, but they are actually in the same network. But let me actually just show you the different branch, more advanced one. And just to show you some of the options that are being used here. First is actually networks. So each Docker container can have as many interfaces, like actually the virtual machine or something like this, as many as you want. So here I describe the network called main, actually. And inside, when these, just a second, let me stop this container, the set of containers, and switch to the different branch, and start. Yes, they're running. And just for example, to connect, just to show you that here, this container, the Kamailio container, have two interfaces. One loop back the default one container, and the second container is actually that the Docker is creating the network for you. It's internal network. It's Docker is making these networks based on the on the IP tables rules. So I'm not diving into it. It's just let's say hidden from me, and I'm okay how it's being worked. So the one of the interesting things about here that you can automatically add aliases to the containers that are running. For example, this asterisk machine has an alias called asterisk under -1. So if I'll ping from Kamailio machine *1, it will be automatically resolved to their IP address. So I don't need to actually to be aware on which IP it's running. So it's done automatically for me. Also, what is interesting, you can have the things like extra hosts. It's like putting in etc hosts file records that will point the domain names and the IP addresses. What is being interesting for example, here, you can add the domain names. You can play around with domain names inside Kamailio and just, for example, putting them on the local host or some other host that you're actually aware of. So it's just a way of putting the etc hosts inside the container. So for example, here in Kamailio CVG, in this example, I do have, for example, this thing. So my local interface, the local host interface, is advertising as siplocalhost.com, which is actually just described here. So for example, if I'll ping the siplocalhost.com from inside the container, it will point me to the localhost interface. So that's and actually what this example is about, it's just a simple load balancer for Kamailio, just to show you that this is a possible way to have even the quite complex, let's say, complex basic scenario inside Docker containers and actually have some tests within it. So here I have the DB text, as I've mentioned, and the dispatcher that I have two machines of asterisk with the same set ID, with the same priority, with the same actually most everything, but inside Kamailio I can run comctl dispatcher dump. So you can see the both are actually here. And what is also interesting, it's interesting that you can use also SNGrep inside the container, and it would be restricted to the network inside specifically this container. So for example, these are pingers from dispatcher module that is actually just pinging the *1 and 2, and you can see only them inside this container. So if you go, for example, to the * container, you will see the receiving. But if you run SNGrep on the host machine, I think I can try to do this. SNGrep -c, SNGrep. I'm pretty sure you will see some kind of duplications here, but again, I'm not sure about this. Yeah. So yeah, you will see the duplications because it will leave one interface, then it will arrive to the second interface, and it's again, you will see the duplications on the host machine. But when you're running SNGrep inside just one container, you will have like a local normal environment. That's just, I don't know, to show you some of the stuff. For example, I'm using Zoipa. I've got, I think, on some previous Kamailio World sessions. Yes, it's actually just have a registration. And actually here, what also I wanted to show you, it's the thing that I'm actually registering on the domain, but the using outbound proxy as my local host. So the registration is actually quite straightforward here. So register comes from my interface, and the Kamailio is just forward this to the one of the * machines. And on the * machine, I have these client is actually described in the sipconf, I think. Yeah. So yeah, this is the test. So test. So it's just actually the example of what kind of environments you can have within the Docker and the Docker Compose on the Kamailio. So I can have, let's say, one more example. So just, okay. So just to stop all the containers and before switching branch. So I have, okay, just a second. Yeah, and by the way, all these registrations are replicated in the location DB, so it's actually also a good point that you can have all the information about, let's say, what is going on in the database using DB text. You can have it just in the plain text. So this is a register from the whatsoever, and here we have some kind of information about transport and user log. So it's just to mention. So I'm not saving it and switching it to the different. So here it's a bit different idea. It's Kamailio that added SIP, the famous testing tool here. So and particular, this example is just to show you that you can actually also test your current Kamailio config with SIP inside the same, let's say, environment, inside the same network. So I can start it. And just verify that this is running. Yes, all of them is running, and I'm just connecting to the container. And somewhere I do have some actually string just to scenario. Actually, this is scenario quite interesting because it's using, let me actually show you the actual SIP packet, because it's also quite interesting. It's was done for testing one of interesting stuff. So it was done to test some SMS that it will come with an invite within invite packet with content type, and the idea of the Kamailio, actually just in this example, was that it should reply back to the ACK with bye. So just immediately. So it was quite strange requirement from the SMS operator, and it was just like a proof of concept that the Kamailio can do this actually here. So it's done on even stateless routing module. So what it's actually all about. So okay, it was quite briefly, quite fast, and I'm pretty sure that let's say you can't get the in this example with much details, but the idea was just to show that many variety of the things are possible. So you don't, for example, need to have a spare virtual machine server that is running, for example, Kamailio somewhere on the DigitalOcean. Okay, it's good to have one, but imagine that you're, I don't know, like a freelancer, and you're traveling and you're lying on the beach with a laptop, and you have a crappy internet, so you can have at least some testing environment directly on your machine. And what is really good about this, that you can have it just when you need it. So when you don't need it, you can just turn it off, and your system would be clean, good, and all okay. And you can have these database information, all your configs. It could be pushed to Git, and you can have there some, let's say, maybe client non-sensitive data or something like this. Because, for example, here for these client actually modules, I'm using the Kamailio local file that is actually usually not included into the Git repository, so I'm not putting some kind of sensitive data like IP addresses or some other information inside Git, but the core config is actually open. You can use it, and I'm using this as a, let's say, a skeleton for next projects. So that's the idea of how I'm using that, what I've come to when I'm using the Kamailio. So it's actually not development like a development Kamailio, it's developing for Kamailio, using all of these environments, and this is mainly it. For actually links, you can have all of these examples that I've showed you are actually open. You can use them, and the rest of the links are actually to Docker explaining how to use Docker in production with real-time things, because again, by default, Docker is using CFS, which uses time slices like 100 milliseconds per task. So if you have a switching between process like 100 milliseconds, you highly possible will get into the jitter problem, because you have the packetization time like 20 milliseconds for the RTP. So putting RTP in Docker, I'm not recommending it, but if you want to do it, you have to be aware of where it is, what are you doing, and actually best consult with someone who is, let's say, specialist in Linux kernel, which I'm apparently not. So this is, yeah, okay, where is my, yeah, I think.
Okay.
So this is mainly it, and again, it's not about just to learn something new and fascinating. It's about repeating what is actually the combining of the technologies that already known, and just to show you that the various ways are possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. You're very interesting. I'll have to check the Git repository.
So I'll send you a presentation that you can attach it to the recording.
Yeah, and yeah, I already have the presentation from Yufei and Alexander, and I uploaded also my presentation. I'll do yours as well in kamailio.org/events. I see now questions for you on the Matrix channel. I'm gonna read it for you, so it's recorded as well. How you resolve problem in this configuration, Kamailio being always behind the net?
Actually, it's advertised. So I'm not solving, I'm using the advertise. So when I'm putting it to the real world environments, I'm fine tuning network a bit. So I'm trying to get the all core logic about routing, about all of the stuff inside the Docker, and then I'm fine tuning it's on the real world object, means on the production or testing system with a real network environment.
And another one, how you emulate when some of the addresses used by Kamailio are white IP. I'm not sure what this means. Maybe listening on 0.0.0.0. I'm not sure what's the meaning. Typically, this is for firewall, like whitelisting, but I'm not sure.
No, 0.0.0 just been to alt interfaces usually. So it's actually the same. So how I'm dealing with the network, again, idea of this setup is to get the some basic routing and leaving some of the network behind. And when it comes actually to network, I am fine-tuning again. It's on the production and on the real network environment.
A clarification, it is about IP and the external network. So probably this we can discuss it.
Yeah, so the network, again, you have in, let me actually share my my screen again. The network, again, the Docker Compose and the Docker actually itself, providing you with a different variety of networks. So you can have as many networks as many as you want. When you're specifying, for example, these port forwards, by default, Docker points it to the allow interface of the container. So 127.0.0.1. And these networks here are actually added dynamically. So I'm using these interfaces actually to emulate, for example, external and internal network. But for external, yes, these things are actually for advertising. So adding a domain that is pointing to the local host, and then in Kamailio config to have something like, already I think showed it, something like this. So when the config is being switched to the real network, I'm just adjusting these parameters, and most of the time it's getting to where it's.
Okay, so somehow you got the answer. The question seems to be answered from the person point of view. Just to say, from the YouTube channel comments about Hector, I would like if this example code will be shared, and it is already on GitHub. Yuri already mentioned that.
It's on GitHub, yes. It's
yeah.
open.
And then someone suggests using PG-Swine Docker instead of CP, just as a suggestion to read it from the comments. Maybe they disappear from the YouTube chat. And some people are thanking you for this very informative presentation, which I also want to do because, as I said at the beginning, it's a topic of interest for me that in many cases I need to test with the different topologies for core network systems.
Yeah, again, about network, it's have their drawbacks, it's have their some problems, but I'm not using it for let's say testing different networks, but testing routing mostly.
Yeah,
so some core logic, and then just adjust it to the network, to the real network afterwards.
Yeah. Somehow similar. It's in most of my cases as well. Okay, so just to tell to everyone, after this session, I'm gonna stop the streaming on our backup system that we use only for speakers. The main conferencing server, it's back online and should be ready for streaming. Anyhow, we are gonna have an open discussion with you and Kamailio developers about the current state of the project, future plans, and whatever you want to ask, you are free to do. So everyone can join the main conferencing server prepared for the event. If streaming is going to work, then we are going to stream. If it fails again, we continue the discussion between us and sort out what doubts you have, the question, and so on. So I'm going to stop the streaming here, and I will see you on the conf.kamailio.dev/Kamailio Word video conferencing room soon.